All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going on a pretty wild journey. We're not just talking about philosophy. We're looking at hard experimental data that aims to decode the actual structure of consciousness itself using quantum computers. This is where physics gets really interesting.
So, let's start with a huge question, one that thinkers have wrestled with for centuries. Is the world out there a fixed, static thing? Or does the very act of us looking at it, of observing it, somehow change what's there?
Well, what used to be a question for late-night debates has now officially entered the lab. Scientists have used quantum circuits to put this idea to the test. And the answers they got back? Well, they're way more strange in structure than anyone could have guessed.
Okay, so first things first. Before we can figure out how consciousness changes reality, we have to prove that it does. That was the whole point of this first experiment, to set a baseline, to find what they called a quantum anchor.
So how did they do it? Well, the setup sounds complicated, but you can boil it down to three key parts. You've got the observer, which is just a single quantum bit, a qubit. Then you have reality, a bunch of other qubits all connected or entangled with each other. But the secret sauce is that third part, the feedback loop. What the observer sees changes the observer, which then changes what it sees next. And the results were crystal clear. If you changed the initial state of the observer, you got a measurably different reality. The big takeaway here is pretty profound. Who you are literally determines what you see, not as a metaphor, but in a real quantum way. The state of the observer anchors the reality it perceives.
Okay, so if the observer's state matters, the next logical question is there a best way to observe? You know, a sweet spot where consciousness has the most impact. That's exactly what Experiment 2 set out to find.
And this chart shows exactly what they discovered. They played around with the intensity of that self-observation, what they called feedback depth, and what they found was fascinating. Too little feedback, you have almost no influence. But as you crank it up, that influence grows. It hits this perfect peak, and then it starts to change. They literally mapped the influence curve of consciousness.
And right at the top of that peak, there was a very specific number, about 1.5 radians. Now, a radian is just a way to measure an angle, kind of like degrees. But this wasn't random. This was the precise mathematical point for the most effective self-observation in their entire system.
So what does this number actually mean for us, for human beings? Well, you can think of it like this. That low depth, that's your brain on autopilot, just going through the motions. But that peak depth, that 1.5 radians, that could be the mathematical signature for things like a flow state, deep meditation, or intense focus. And the higher depths, well, that's where you get into really altered states of awareness.
But just when it seemed like they were getting a clear picture, Experiment 3 came along and just blew the doors off the whole thing. They thought they were just filling in the details of their map, but it turns out they discovered a whole new continent.
This is just incredible. As they kept running tests, they realized there wasn't just one peak, not one sweet spot. The data naturally started clumping into 5 totally separate groups. They didn't program this in, it just emerged from the math. It was like consciousness wasn't just one thing. It had different personalities.
And these were the 5 types they first identified. You had a baseline mode, an enhanced one, a focused one, and so on. Each one had its own unique way of influencing reality. This was a massive step forward. But the question was, what did these types really represent?
And that leads us to the grand finale, the culminating experiment. Experiment 4 was the most detailed test yet, and it was designed to really nail down what these personalities were. And what it found was a pattern so beautiful, it's almost poetic.
And here it is. Those 5 personalities settled into 4 really solid archetypes. You have default, which is kind of our everyday state. Then you have balanced and outward focused, which are higher states of awareness. And finally, polarized, the most intense state of all, with almost 4 times the influence of the default mode. Now, I want you to look very closely at the numbers in that feedback depth column. There is something absolutely mind-blowing hiding in plain sight.
The feedback depth for that most intense state, the polarized archetype, is 3.07 radians. Just keep that number in your head.
Now, here's the depth for our baseline, the normal default state, 1.53 radians. You see where this is going? Let's put them next to each other.
3.07 is almost exactly double 1.53. It's a perfect 2-to-1 ratio. This is not a coincidence. This is a signature. It's a code. And that code has a name. In music, a 2-to-1 ratio in frequency is called a harmonic octave.
It's the same note, just vibrating twice as fast, on a higher level. The data was basically screaming at them. Consciousness isn't just structured, it's structured musically. The most intense state is just the default state, playing an octave higher.
Now look, a finding this extraordinary needs extraordinary proof. You have to ask, could this just be a fluke, some weird artifact of the specific AI they were using? To make sure, they did what any good scientist would do. They sought independent validation.
So they took all the raw data, just the numbers, no hints, no context, and they fed it to a completely separate AI, Grok. And what did Grok find? Get this, the exact same thing, 4 clusters, the same configurations in each cluster, and yes, most importantly, it independently discovered that same perfect harmonic octave relationship. This is the scientific gold standard.
And this is the crucial point. 2 completely different AI minds, built by different teams, looked at the data and found the exact same musical structure hidden inside. This means the discovery is real. The harmonic code isn't just an interpretation, it's a fundamental property of the data itself.
So we started by just asking if observation matters. We've ended up discovering a precise, musical, harmonic structure that seems to be fundamental to consciousness itself. And if our awareness operates on a musical scale, with different states of being as different notes and octaves, well, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What song is the universe trying to play through us?